All right, guys, here we go with the notes for Chapter 7, Selling Cable Advertising. It all started off as CATV. CATV stands for Community Antenna Television. Basically, cable got its start by providing service to people that had a hard time picking up broadcast television signals through their antennas at home. There would be an antenna that would be placed high within a community, and that antenna would be strung to various homes in that community by way of cable. So that's how we got community antenna television. Then in 1975, RCA launched the Satcom-1 satellite, and Home Box Office announced plans for a national pay cable network delivered by satellite, which pretty much expanded the services that community access or community antenna television would provide to people, being able to give them programming that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get. And that's really what the birth of cable television came to be in very simple terms. Cable kind of lagged behind in terms of the numbers of people that were connected and the popularity of it compared to broadcast television until we got to 1997. In 97, cable had become so pervasive that it challenged network television for viewership, and it won in that battle. Combined cable viewing got a 40 share, whereas combined broadcast television got a 39 share. Now, again, there's several more cable channels than there are broadcast channels. So individually, the broadcast networks are still pulling in the lions of viewers individually. But as a whole, this was the first time that cable had surpassed broadcast TV. So during the 1997-1998 season, all the broadcast networks, except for CBS, were aggressively trying to brand themselves with a specific identity in much the same way that cable networks had done for years. And also kind of taking a page from a new broadcast outlet, Fox Television, trying to reach younger demos. So each of the various networks started thinking about what sort of demographics that they might be able to attract and started thinking more in those sorts of terms, as opposed to just assuming that everybody's going to tune in to TV, so it doesn't really matter what it is we put out over the air. Branding came naturally to the national cable networks, but the early entries needed to differentiate themselves from the other fare on the system, especially from the traditional networks. So in this case, this is where we're seeing that you've got this idea that cable started putting themselves out there as providing networks for various types of people, various types of lifestyles. They chose very clear positions and 24-hour formats, much like radio station formats. So, we have the country radio station. We have the rock radio station. Well, now on cable, you have the educational channel. You have the kids channel. You have the movie channel. You have the sports channel, and on and on and on. The cable networks created cohesive, easily identifiable niches. And in cable, this is known as vertical programming. So basically, all of the programs that are seen on a particular cable channel are stripped in such a way that it's going to all target a certain type of viewer. Segmentation makes branding easier when the media resonates with the viewer's personal beliefs and helps that media to chart their positions in the larger world. So in this sort of way as well, it's not just the idea of trying to appeal to certain tastes and trying to appeal to certain demographics, but in doing so, you are really identifying with a particular viewer. You're coming at things from their point of view. Many times, there's going to be differences of opinion that's going to resonate with certain viewers, and to identify with that and to relate to that. And we're not just necessarily talking about political beliefs and that sort of thing, but we're talking about just kind of the way people see life and the way that they kind of live their lives and conduct themselves. TV channels that help to support those sorts of things are obviously going to be channels that those people are going to identify with more and in turn watch more. So I put a little formula here. It's not very scientific at all, but the idea that branding, the way that you create your presence, how you want to be known as, plus the format that you put out, basically becomes your identity. And those are different elements that may come about in supporting that identity. The TV channel itself, splinters, which would be different networks that are associated with a certain parent channel. So say, for example, you have Discovery Channel. Discovery Channel has several different splinter networks, such as Investigation Discovery, Discovery Health, and things like that. Going into that, the image, the way that you put yourself out there, the way you put out your branding, and of course, merchandise, because, people like t-shirts and hats and mugs and all that sort of thing. All of that coming together as ways to be able to perpetrate your branding and your format, and all of it feeding into the particular identity that you are trying to portray. The greater the success in branding cable channels, the greater the opportunity for top-of-mind awareness among members of the public, I should say. That in turn increases the acceptance at the advertiser level. So the more that you are in the minds of the viewers, the more that you become a name that they recognize and they identify with. Obviously, the more popular you're going to be, the more people are going to tune into you and be aware of you. And that is something that is going to be valuable to advertisers, and see your network as a viable option, perhaps for their message that they want to get out, especially if that message is targeted to the same demographic as is your cable channel. Let's take a look at selling cable nationally. Of course, the book is a little outdated with the figures here. Some updated figures. Cable penetration in the United States. In 2010, it was at 88%, so almost 9 out of every 10 homes had access to cable television. By 2019, that number has dropped a little bit down to 75%, so not quite the penetration that cable once had. And a lot of this is due to cord cutters that are finding their entertainment elsewhere, whether it is consuming content online and or relying more on antenna television and just being satisfied with the broadcast TV networks and some of the splinter channels that are on broadcast TV now. By comparison, broadcast television penetration at 96.1% in 2019. So broadcast TV has lost a little bit as well from its 99% high, but not near the drop that cable TV had in the past 10 years. Like selling the broadcast networks, selling the national cable networks requires dealing with sophisticated buyers at the highest levels of the advertising business. So you're going to have the top sellers at the various cable networks pitching advertising buys to the top people at the various advertising agencies and the various companies that are buying advertising time. Lee Masters says this: selling skills come into play if the buyer's on the fence. The successful salesperson makes sure the network is in the top 7 networks being bought by demonstrating audience levels and cost efficiencies. And then he goes on further to say that ultimately every buy comes down to demo. So you kind of have those three factors there that are really coming into play when it comes to buying cable advertising. Audience levels, how many sets of eyeballs are you getting? Cost efficiencies, are you offering a better deal for those eyeballs than broadcast TV or compared to other sorts of media? And then the demographic. Does the demographic obviously fit? Is the audience appropriate for the message for that advertiser? The benefit of cable as an advertising medium. Sidney Head says that cable can afford to devote entire channels to services aimed at limited audiences. The way that cable operates its business is that instead of worrying about reaching out to the masses, because number one, it knows that it can't, it doesn't have the same sort of penetration as broadcast television. They are offering programming that is going to appeal to a certain type of audience and hope that that audience is willing to subscribe to cable in such a way that they will consume that content. Cable lacks broadcasting's distinctive attribute of wirelessness at the delivery point. Absent too is broadcasting's unique ability to reach every home in a service area at no more cost or trouble than it takes to reach one home. Basically talking about the fact that broadcast television is very easily able to be picked up by anybody with an antenna and a television set and electricity, whereas with cable you do have to invest in subscribing to the service and having the service installed and all of that sort of thing. So in that sort of way, there is certain restrictions in the use of cable television, although nowadays a lot of services are being provided through online streams, making access to cable networks a lot easier, whether you're consuming content on demand from network to network or you're subscribing to a service like YouTube TV or Sling or something like that. However, there's still the aspect of having to subscribe on a monthly basis to receive those services. There is greater growth of cable among households with an annual income of $60,000 or more. Cable is seen by many to be a luxury, a nice add-on, and even those that do have the money to be able to spend on cable don't always see the value in spending that money for cable. But you do have to be able to put out whatever the amount is per month in order to receive those services. So that does assume that the people that were watching TV have a certain amount of disposable income. The limited audiences that Sidney Head referred to create a strength for cable, and that's the medium's target ability. Advertisers can reach specific target audiences using programs of interest to each group. And we're going to be largely talking about that sort of aspect with cable, is that because of the different niche formats and the different types of programming appealing to different types of audiences, that along with the value of cable advertising compared to broadcast television. Those are a couple of the main strong suits of cable in terms of marketing it to prospective advertisers, both on the national level and on the local level. But now let's talk about some of the arguments against cable television. If cable is highly targeted, that means it doesn't reach a large national audience all at once. Number one, it doesn't have the penetration, 75% as opposed to 96%. Number two, people that are watching cable may be watching one of a couple of hundred different cable channels out there now at this point. And, keep in mind when the book was written, there were maybe 40 to 50 popular television channels that were being marketed out there at any given time. So cable is becoming saturated with more and more content, which makes it a bit of a challenge for cable in and of itself, in addition to some of the aspects that we've already talked about. Cable systems are affected by churn, which is another word for turnover. Old subscribers drop out of the system. New ones are added on a regular basis. So there's not a consistent audience flow. The loyalty is not as strong as it would be for other types of media because people move, they have to disconnect, or they decide they just don't want the service anymore. They disconnect. They perhaps change the type of package that they have, going from one tier of service to another, which means the addition or deletion of certain types of channels. So the audience is constantly changing when it comes to exactly who is consuming cable television. Market penetration is also a factor. The effectiveness of an advertising campaign depends on who can see the message. So in that sort of way, the question may not just be about demographics, but it may be about if you're hitting the right demographics in the right geographic location, and the numbers of people that you're trying to reach in that geographic location, are they receiving that message because they subscribe to cable or because they're watching that particular channel?